voted up, 77 votes. Australia is holding a plebiscite on whether to legalize gay marriage. I'm against the Yes campaign, but only because it's backed by cultural Marxists. I'm curious to hear your views on gay marriage. Well, I would be against it too if it was backed by cultural Marxists, because it isn't clear to me that it will satisfy the ever-increasing, what would you call it, demand for an assault on traditional modes of being. Now, with regards to gay marriage specifically, that's a really tough one for me, because, you know, I can imagine, I can't do anything really other than spout platitudes about it, I suppose, unfortunately. You know, if the marital vows are taken seriously, then it seems to me that it's a means whereby gay people can be integrated more thoroughly into standard society, and that's probably a good thing. And maybe that would decrease promiscuity, which is a public health problem, although obviously that's not limited to gay people, although gay men tend to be more promiscuous than average, probably because there's no women to bind them with regards to their sexual activity. The problem is that it does seem to me to be part of a wedge, and it isn't obvious to me that legalizing gay marriage has done anything to decrease the demands that the radical left neo-Marxist types are placing on traditional society. So those are my views. I know they're confused, you know, because I'm in favor of extending the bounds of traditional relationships to people who wouldn't be involved in a traditional long-term relationship, but I'm concerned about the undermining of traditional modes of being, including marriage, which, you know, has technically and historically been a union between a man and a woman, fundamentally for the purpose of raising children in a stable and an optimal and stable environment. So, and marriage has already taken a fair bit of damage over the last few decades. You know, poor people are increasingly less likely to be married, and that's really not good for them as far as I'm concerned. When I was 25, well, I was obsessed. 25, so that would have been 87. I'd been in graduate school for 2 years. Well, you know, when I was 25 or so, I probably weighed about 138 pounds. I smoked like a pack of cigarettes a day. I drank tremendous amount of alcohol. I was from northern Alberta, this rough little town up in northern Alberta called Fairview, and you know, there were long winters there, and my friends were heavy drinkers, and most of them dropped out of school by the time they were 15 or 16, went off to work on the oil rigs, and you know, it was a rough town, and we drank a lot. I started when I was 14, and you know, and so I had a lot of bad habits, let's say, and things that were, and I wasn't in great shape physically, and I was also still intellectually obsessed by, as I am now, and so that would have been in 85. But I decided around then, about 85, 84, something like that, maybe a little earlier, that I was really going to try to get my act together, and so I started doing that. First of all, I quit smoking. Well, that took a long time because I eventually had to quit drinking too in order to quit smoking, and I started working out, playing sports, which I'd never done. I was a small kid. I'd been skipped a grade, and I was a small for my age, so sports were never, especially team sports, were never really a domain of expertise for me. Although I skied and went trapping with my dad, and went, you know, cross-country skiing and camping and all that. So, but when I went to graduate school, I started swimming. The first physical exercise routine I did, I enrolled in a swimsercise course, I think it was called. So it was me and this like really overweight kid, and like these 60-year-old women and men, they could out exercise me like mad. It was really embarrassing. Me and the overweight kid, you know, we'd be just panting ourselves 3/4 to death at the end of the bloody workout, and these 60-year-old women who weren't in great shape were like, you know, chatting away as if nothing was going on at all in the pool. So that was quite embarrassing, and as was going to the weight room, you know, because when I started I could barely bench press 75 pounds, and people used to keep coming over and helping me, which was the last thing I bloody well wanted, but certainly needed. And I got to the point where I could bench press 225 pounds. I think that was the best I did, and I gained about 30 pounds of muscle in a year and a half. So that was a good thing. So like I was kind of a wild man, and you know, I'm a little bit manic in my temperament, and so you know, I was I was kind of going every direction at the same time. So, and you know, I don't regret that. I had a fine time when I was a kid, but I needed really to get disciplined, and I had to do it because I was working on these hard problems that, you know, that I've been discussing with all of you, and I've been working on them really, you know, obsessively since I was probably about 18, maybe even earlier than that. And got to the point around 25 when I was in graduate school trying to get my PhD, so doing all my research. Like, I published 15 papers by the time I graduated with my PhD, which was, I think, by a fairly large measure, the most papers that any graduate student at that time had ever published at McGill. I think that's right. It might have been twice as many, or maybe twice as many, maybe even 3 times as many. And at the same time, I wrote Maps of Meaning, which was a terribly difficult thing to do, because I was writing about 3 hours a day doing that, and I couldn't do all that and continue with my misbehavior, you know, my sort of, my, what would you say, my hedonistic, my massive hedonistic consumption of alcohol and all of that. I just couldn't keep it up, and also work seriously on the issues that were at hand. So, you know, I had to stop. That's a sacrifice. I had to stop messing about and straighten myself out. And I got married. Well, the woman who's my wife, Tammy, who I've known since she was 8 years old, she lived across the street from me in this little town called Fairview, and I was in love with her like the first time I saw her, which is quite the bloody thing. So that's worked out pretty well for me. But she came to live with me about the same time, and, you know, we decided jointly to get our act together, and we swore that we'd tell each other the truth, which I think she's actually done better than me. Like, I don't think she's lied to me ever in our entire marriage, which is unbelievable, you know. And it's been so useful because I can really tell her things and we can really talk. So I tell you, if you want to have a good relationship, man, you embed it in the truth, because if you don't embed it in the truth, you don't have a relationship. It's just lies. It's a tissue of lies, and it will dissolve in the chaos as soon as a crisis comes along. So the truth is a terrible thing, but not compared to falsehood. So, all right, so let's look at the live chat here. I thought I'd take a bit of time to respond to something that happened in the media today, in the aftermath of James Damore's Google memo. I know the coverage it's received. A journalist named Steve Kovac wrote a story for Business Insider called "Silicon Valley's Liberal Bubble Has Burst and the Culture War Has Arrived." In that article, which discussed the memo, he characterized myself and Stefan Molyneux, a well-known YouTube personality, as far right. What his article said specifically was that, and I quote, "YouTube, which is ironically owned by Google and has become a hotspot for right-wing vloggers, was the outlet of choice for Damore himself. His first public interviews were to Stefan Molyneux and Jordan B. Peterson, far-right figures who have built up large followings on the video site." And I felt that that was inappropriate, let's say, to say the least. And so I tweeted that and emailed him and said that that was a mischaracterization, and asked him to justify his claims. And so what I'm going to do is to read our email exchange to you, okay? And you can draw your own conclusions from it. So the first email, this is my email. I said, "Dear Mr. Kovac, you called me a far-right figure in press. You don't have one iota of proof for that statement, and it is patently untrue. I've been lecturing, for example, about the dangers of National Socialist ideology for decades. Find a single thing I've said that places me on the far right. In the absence of a smoking pistol, is that grounds for a lawsuit for defamation of character? Inquiring minds want to know. If you want to talk, I'm open to it. But you should watch your words. I'm seriously unhappy about your careless and false characterization. Watch this, for example, and see if it's far right." And I linked to a YouTube video of a lecture I gave on the temperamental basis of right-wing belief. And so then Steve responded, and he said, "How would you prefer to be characterized?" And then he said, "Just saw your tweets. Please let me know what you would prefer." And so I said, "I would prefer the truth. I would prefer that journalists such as yourself use absolute precision of language. It's not up to me to tell you what that is. It's up to you, given your choice of profession. And this is no laughing matter, Mr. Kovac, as you seem to imply, with, quote, please let me know what you prefer, end quote. I've been fighting an intellectual war against radicals on the right and left for 3 decades. I have a very clear and public track record with regards to my attitude to the far right. I spent a lot of time and effort, for example, in my first book, Maps of Meaning, outlining the psychopathology of National Socialists, and have made my opposition to such things known in a manner both public and widely distributed. The fact that I am equally unhappy with the gulag-type leftists generally ignored by the modern postmodernists does not make me far right. I'm seriously unhappy about being carelessly lumped in with people I despise and have spent my life fighting. He wrote back and said, thank you for your response. So the article is truthful and accurate. How would you like to be characterized? I said very clearly, you mischaracterized me as far right. On what grounds whatsoever can you make that claim? And having made it, it is your responsibility to either justify the characterization with some investigation or to withdraw it and apologize. Politically, I'm a classic British liberal. Temperamentally, I'm high in openness, which tilts me to the left, although I am also conscientious, which tilts me to the right. Philosophically, I am an individualist, not a collectivist of the right or the left. Metaphysically, I'm an American pragmatist who has been strongly influenced by the psychoanalytic and clinical thinking of Freud, Jung, and the psychotherapists who have followed in their wake. There is simply nothing I have said or done that makes me far right. Quite the contrary. I've warned thousands of students over the course of 3 decades that the spirit of Auschwitz concentration camp guards dwells in their heart, and that they should do everything in their power to recognize its existence and overcome it. Every single lecture of my Maps of Meaning course, various versions which have now been watched or listened to by millions of people, makes some variant of that point. I've also produced a series of individual self-development programs now used by thousands of people to strengthen themselves as individuals, determine their proper and honorable destinies, and live productive, meaningful lives.